What's up, people of the internet? My name is Dabacab, and we got a bunch of new cards to go over, so let's just dive right in. Alright, so first off, we have the Rebel Instigator, a 4-mana red creep that reads, after the combat phase, if Rebel Instigator dealt combat damage to a creep this round, summon another Rebel Instigator, and of course his stats are 2/3. So the most direct comparison we can make for this card is of course the red Mist Pillager. That card works a little bit differently. When it hits a tower, it duplicates with this card, the Rebel Instigator. When it hits a creep, or is it creep or unit? Damage to a creep. Oh, that means it can't hit heroes. Interesting. So when it hits an enemy creep, it duplicates. So obviously the thing that you want to put this in front of is other melee creeps, because with 2 attack and 3 health, it is perfectly positioned to survive that first melee creep hit, meaning you're going to get 2 hits off, ideally, and spawn 2 more Rebel Instigators. Now, this is a great way for going wider than your opponent, because once you go wider than your opponent, they kind of stop duplicating, because obviously they're going to be hitting the tower and then they're not going to be hitting the melee creeps. And of course, the issue, which I just realized when I read this card, is that it only works if you hit creep. So if your opponent doesn't have many creep and they've just got a bunch of heroes, and those Rebel Instigators aren't going to matter for much. Of course, that might not matter too much, because if the Rebel Instigators keep spawning in front of other creep and then, you know, spawning in front of creep, spawning, it's like, how do you kill this thing? You know what I mean? I can sort of imagine a scenario where every turn, you know, it just spawns another one, and then the old one dies, and then it spawns another one, and the other one dies. You have almost infinite blockers. So obviously this card has a lot of potential, but it's going to depend a lot on the enemy deck that they have available. And it's going to depend a lot on your ability to play this in front of melee creeps, because if they got really massive creep, they're going to one-shot this. This card's going to be much less valuable, and if they have mostly heroes, this card's going to be much less valuable as well. But I like this card. I think it's super neat. Anything that duplicates, that's kind of like a red. I guess they just screw like bunnies. They're constantly reproducing with all these duplicating cards. So I can't wait to try this out in Constructed and Draft, because this card looks like tons and tons of fun for sure. All right, next up is the Olmecs Arena, a 6-cost red improvement that reads, draw a card after a hero dies. Now, worth pointing out that the text in this says after a hero dies, meaning that you get the benefit if the enemy hero dies and as your own hero dies as well. The kind of awkward thing about this is that it's in red, and red has the toughest, brawliest, most resilient heroes in the game. So I don't know how often you're really going to benefit from drawing cards on your own, especially if you got really tanky heroes like Tidehunter or Axe or Bristleback. Of course, the plus side is that red heroes are exceptionally good at killing enemy heroes. Probably not quite as good as black, but still really good at it. So you're going to potentially get a value that way. I can see this having extra value if you have something like a red-blue deck, because obviously your own heroes are very vulnerable to dying. I could actually see a scenario where you've got, you know, a red hero in lane 1 and 2 blue heroes in lane 2. So you put the Olmecs Arena from lane 1, you cast Olmecs Arena in lane 2, so that when your weak as hell, vulnerable blue heroes die, inevitably, you get the card draw off of it. I could also see it being quite useful in a red-black deck, because black heroes tend to be very squishy. They're all offense, no defense, which is perfectly suited for this, because the all offense means you're going to be killing enemy heroes, and the no defense means they're going to be dying. So I think this might actually be kind of a staple in red-black decks. The issue, of course, is it's a bit pricey. I mean, at 6 mana, how many times is a hero really going to die in a lane by the time you get to 6 mana? Maybe 2 or 3 max, so you're not going to get a ton of card draw out of this. But I think it's going to depend largely on what colors are running in your deck, and how resilient the enemy heroes are to decide how good this card is going to be. All right, next up is the Black Spell Lodestone Demolition, with pretty sweet art, if I do say so myself. This is a 3-cost black spell that reads, deal damage to the enemy tower equal to the total armor on enemies. So obviously this card is going to be much better on red decks, because red units, red heroes, red creep, they all tend to have much more armor than everyone else. But against other colors, not going to be all that valuable, especially like blue. You know, like blue heroes don't really have armor. Blue creep don't really have armor, so I'm not really sure how much value you're going to get out of it. It's going to be kind of a kind of a dud, kind of a brick, kind of a dead card in your hand. But against really resilient combat lines with tons and tons of armor, I guess it could have potential. I just have to wonder, I mean, this is black we're talking about. Doesn't black have more reliable ways to deal siege damage, to deal direct tower damage? I would be very, very surprised if this is at the top of the list for black evasive damage. That just doesn't seem right, especially because it's just so situational. So I'm not really feeling this card, but I could be proved wrong. I guess, you know, maybe if red kind of climbs to the top of the meta, then it could be good, but at the moment it kind of feels like a kind of a weak card, I would say. All right, next up we got a new item card, the Cloak of Endless Carnage. This is a 13 cost accessory that reads, equipped hero has +8 health. Draw a card after an allied neighbor of equipped hero dies. So this is an interesting card. I could see this item being pretty useful on heroes that give adjacency bonuses, especially offensive adjacency bonuses like Lycan. Because of course, Lycan makes the units next to him increasingly dangerous threats. You know, a melee creep becomes a 4/4 instead of a 2/4, so the enemy wants to deal with those melee creep or whatever the unit is as quickly as possible. This punishes that action. There aren't many other heroes with adjacency bonuses. There are, of course, like Enchantress and Treant Protector, but those are defensive adjacency bonuses, which kind of has some anti-synergy with this because you kind of want them to die. I can also see this being pretty good on Kana and Prelix because these two heroes are both phenomenal at spawning melee creep onto the board right next to them. So, you know, potentially every melee creep becomes a card draw, which can be really, really strong. But really, you're gonna have to pair this with the right hero to get the most value out of it, just because it's kind of expensive. I mean, it's got the health built in, but I mean, are you better off taking this, or are you better off taking like Stonehall Cloak for the stacking health buff, or some other more expensive item like maybe Horn of the Alpha? I don't know. It's just you got to have the right hero pairing for sure in order to get actual mileage out of the card draw. All right, we have a new hero reveal. Dark Seer is a green hero with 5 attack and 9 health. His ability is a 2-turn cooldown. It's Surge. Move another ally to another lane. And then his premier card, Ion Shell, is a 4-cost green spell. It reads, modify a unit with +3 retaliate. So going down the list, Dark Seer stats are okay. They're, you know, not the best in the world, not the worst in the world, just sort of middle of the road for green. His ability, however, is exceptional. Anything that can move units in lane or out of lane is phenomenal, just because the effect is very rare and very, very valuable. So I could see Dark Seer being kind of popular in green decks just because it allows you to bounce heroes between lanes. You can even bounce Dark Seer himself between lanes. So it's got just a lot of utility, and it's a short cooldown, so you can use it several times throughout a match. His premier card is okay. +3 retaliate kind of sort of increases his body from a 5/9 up to an 8/9, which is, you know, actually pretty solid stats. Of course, the issue is retaliate is probably not quite as good as plus attack because block triggers off of retaliate and attack separately. So if someone has +2 block, like Axe for instance, then the retaliate is going to be blocked for 2 and the damage himself is going to be blocked for 2. So kind of weak to that. Of course, one way to get around that is to cast multiple Ion Shells on the same person, potentially giving you 9 retaliate, which is kind of insane. I could actually see this pairing decently well in a green-blue deck. You just run Ventriloquy. Put Ion Shell on a tanky hero like Omni Knight or Enchantress, then Ventriloquy that hero to get as much retaliate damage as possible. All right, so those are all of the new cards for today. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Are there any standouts for you? Any super strong or super weak cards? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Dabacab out.